Greg, thank you so much. Once again, taking a live look over Jerusalem at this hour. I do want to bring in Harley Lippman, a foreign policy expert serving on advisory boards at Yale and Columbia universities. He's also a board member at both the Washington Institute for Near East Policy and the Brookings Institute. And Harley, I understand you actually just returned there from the border over in Gaza, right?
Yes, I did.
Tell me what the mood is like there when you talk about U.S. and Israeli officials as they discuss the situation in Gaza with a humanitarian crisis. Can you explain to me their thoughts overall?
Yes, I was on the border of Gaza, and I saw about 70 trucks of humanitarian aid being unable to get into Gaza. I got out of the Jeep I was in, and I spoke to the drivers of these trucks, and they explained to me very clearly the problem they have is that Hamas steals the food, violently attacks the trucks. And then what they do is they give it to their own fighters. There are Instagrams and videos that Hamas made showing their own fighters in the tunnels with plenty of food, being very well fed. And then they gouge the Palestinians and they charge the Palestinians money when they're getting this food for free, because this fuels their war effort.
What are officials telling you about maybe more of the efforts here that are going to be made? Because as you mentioned, a big issue is that Hamas is stealing the aid. So what kind of plans are possibly maybe in place?
There is something called the Gaza Humanitarian Fund. It's a creation of the United States and Israel. And they've already delivered 91 million meals in the last few months. So they are trying to feed these poor Palestinians who are starving in Gaza. It's a horrible situation, a huge humanitarian crisis, but it's all the creation of Hamas. Why? Because think of who they're most afraid of. Do you think it's the Israeli army? They're more afraid of losing control of the food distribution. Because if you lose control of the food distribution, you lose control of the people. And they, above all, want control, and they want to be able to have that. So they are doing everything possible to sabotage it. They are provoking Israeli security officials. So there was an example, there was a checkpoint where there were about 25 Israeli soldiers, and literally over 1,000 poor Gazans lined up, and the Israelis had a very detailed program as to how you get the food. Well, maybe out of desperation or provocation, a number of these Palestinians went around these checkpoint rules, and Israel would fire in the air. That's what the policy would show first, which they did. Then they would fire at their legs, and then they would have to fire into the crowd or take the risk that they're about to be overrun. But this is caused partially by desperation, but mostly by design. Hamas does not want the Palestinian people to be fed. Their strategy is for them to starve. It's always been their strategy is to use the Palestinian people because they know they cannot defeat Israel in the battlefield. They don't have planes and tanks like Israel does. It's not possible. Their strategy is to gain international support to be aligned against Israel. And they've been brilliant in that strategy. It's succeeding. And the other problem that you have is there are a lot of foreign nations that may be well-intentioned or have anti-Israel bias, but they're giving oxygen to Hamas. When we were on the cusp of a deal, 28 nations around the world vigorously condemned Israel. And that gave Hamas hope that these organizations and these countries could force Israel's hand. Why should Hamas make a deal and make an agreement with Israel when the international community could force Israel to stop fighting? So these countries are not helpful. They're enabling Hamas to hold out, and most of all, they're enabling Hamas to continue the starvation of the Palestinian people.
On that same note, we played out the U.S. State Department briefing that took place just yesterday, and a lot of reporters there, and I want to get your take as a foreign policy expert here, as there are a lot of opinions, but a lot of the reporters there were saying that Israel appears to be weaponizing food against the people there in Gaza. What is your take overall?
Well, let's think of it this way. You can argue both sides. There are some who say what you said, Israel's weaponizing food, or you could blame Hamas. Let's look at it in terms of whose interest does it serve to starve the Palestinian people. Is it in Israel's interest? Well, think about it. One, it creates the next generation of jihadist fighters against Israel. It creates huge anti-Semitism in the world where Jews are attacked physically. And it creates nations that put sanctions on Israel, won't trade with Israel, is boycotting Israel. That's the result of starving Palestinian people. And it creates huge dissension at home in Israel. Israelis are getting tired of the war. So it can't be in Israel's interest to starve Palestinians. But let's look at Hamas. By Palestinians starving, everybody only blames Israel. It's extraordinary that no one is blaming Hamas for using hospitals, for hiding behind civilians. Nobody's saying that the Red Cross should visit Israeli hostages. Why aren't these nations saying this? It's because there's a double standard when it comes to Israel. So going back to your question, it's in Hamas's interest to starve Palestinians. So Israel's not weaponizing food. As I mentioned, they have a program where they've delivered 91 million meals to the Palestinians. It's in their interest not to starve Palestinians. So the blame really falls on Hamas, but yet remarkably, they don't get the blame. The world just blames Israel. And it is really outrageous and just doesn't meet the facts of what's going on.
And kind of piggybacking off of what you're saying, I also want to get your opinion on this. Why is it that the world seems to be looking toward maybe Hamas and not attacking Israel and saying attacking Hamas, not attacking Hamas and attacking Israel? Why does it appear that Israel is coming out not looking the best at this point?
It's a great question, combination of many things. One is just anti-Semitism. There's been a huge increase in anti-Semitism and anti-Israel feeling all around the world, and this is fueling it. The second reason is the media. The media shows distorted pictures. They'll show starving babies, and then you'll see in the background a bomb go off. And so people are outraged, understandably. Who wants to see starving anyone? It's a horrible thing. So they just conveniently just put the blame on Israel. There's a media bias. The media constantly is blaming Israel for this. And it's extraordinary. They're just barely mentioning Hamas, if at all. So they are just ignoring it. And I think Hamas has a brilliant public relations propaganda war that's succeeding. And then lastly, there's a lot of AI distortions. A lot of these videos are coming from Syria and Yemen that are not even accurate. And the combination of seeing it every night, starving people, because Israel is the stronger country, they seem to blame Israel when Israel wants the war to stop. It's not in their interest for the war to continue. And you could have a ceasefire immediately and allow these Palestinians to get food, but Hamas won't do it. Even the American ambassador to Israel, Huckabee, and Witkoff, who both have criticized Israel. Huckabee criticized Israel 3 times recently, and that makes the news. But when Huckabee said that Hamas is disgusting, that's a quote, that they agreed to something and then they reneged. And why? Because the world community was attacking Israel. It gave Hamas oxygen again and relief. Why should we make concessions to Israel when the international community could force Israel's hand? So it's a combination of all the above.
All right, Harley Lippman, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here and help kind of break it all down. Obviously, a lot of topics. And before I let you go, the one thing I did want to ask you about is U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff essentially saying that Hamas does not seem interested in any kind of peace deal, any kind of truce. So that is why the U.S. left those talks yesterday over in Doha. Are we any closer to a ceasefire deal now than we were maybe weeks ago?
We were close to a ceasefire deal. We would have had a ceasefire deal were it not for 29 nations around the world vigorously condemning Israel and putting sanctions on Israel. It's not a coincidence. This gave the idea to Hamas. They don't have to make peace with Israel because the world will force Israel's hand. And that's the problem. So if the world shows, recognizes the reality that it's Hamas that's behind the starvation, I think you'll get a ceasefire immediately.
All right. Harley Lippman, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and help break all of this down. A lot to discuss, so we definitely appreciate your perspective.